It's time to uplift your heart through the 4 pathways to fulfillment with your host, Saharaexodus. Each week, Sahara will explore fascinating topics such as signs, blessings, and miracles, prophecies and shamanism, as well as understanding the relationship with self and others, and guidance for healers, artists, activists, and innovators. Welcome to an inspiring, timeless moment that will leave your heart fuller and your spirit expanded. And now, here's Saharaexodus.
Aloha, and welcome to Uplift Your Heart, the pathway to fulfillment, through signs, blessings, and miracles, through sacred guided messages. I'm your host, Saharaexodus, for this hour. On Thursdays at 11 a.m. Pacific Time and 2 p.m. Eastern Time, I'll be here each week sharing some extra love and support for you. Welcome everyone who's listening to Oneness Talk Radio, Facebook, and YouTube. I'd like to share with you some personal signs and blessings from this past month, just to give you a hint about the sacred messages that help guide my journey. I was feeling extra uptight about this new path that I'm on because of this major learning curve that's challenging with technology. So the song on the radio just came on recently, Babe by Styx. Do you remember that one? You know it's you, babe, whenever I get weary and I've had enough, feel like giving up. You know it's you, babe, giving me the courage and the strength I need. Please believe that it's true. Babe, I love you. Ooh, babe. So honestly, I must acknowledge that my beautiful husband, George, is truly a godsend and an earth angel. He is my technical producer, wizard, and I would not be here today if it wasn't for his love, his expertise, and his patience. And several people lately have been saying how blessed I am to have him in my life. So that is my blessing story for this month. Now, regarding signs, I'd like to share a few signs. So not too long ago, I was spontaneously returning a book I borrowed from Pastor Phil. And this book is called She. It's all about female pastors breaking new ground with the general public. This is so important as I'm a shamanic priestess. So in return, I gave him my book, Reclaim Your Feminine Power. And it's all about understanding the gifts of one's inner journey, inner world. So I asked him if he would mention about the divine feminine more, and he said, well, maybe today, who knows? And then he just so happened to be sharing this major story about Mary Magdalene and Christ, and how she returns to the people with a special message about discovering one's inner voice within. So later on that night, I saw a star sparkling in this night sky, and it was a reminder of the true north to follow the light. These are all signs for me about being in alignment with my being, and that I'm on an intuitive path. So please take the time to trust your inner voice, your intuition, as it always knows best. Today, I have a special guest, Jeannie Alvin. She's here to share with us practical steps to becoming a mystic. Through her personal stories that has inspired her to be a very prolific writer, Jeannie Alvin is a Master of Arts. She is a psychotherapist, an author, a lightworker, an innovator, a blessing of oneness, and offers miracle prayers. Jeannie's website is Linktree Jeannie 12345, Jeannie with 2 N's. Welcome, Jeannie.
Hi, how are you?
It's lovely to see you. How are you doing?
Great, thank you. I'm honored to be on your show.
Well, I'm honored to have you here. What a blessing. So, Jeannie, I would love to hear where the beginning of your journey started with your childhood. Would you like to share how you became a psychotherapist and author, starting off with the inspiration of your childhood?
Yes, I had a tortuously abusive childhood where I was starved at birth because my father, in his unconsciousness, thought that crying was dangerous.
Oh.
And so he put me in a dark room until I stopped crying. So I starved as a newborn and didn't bond very well. And then when he'd go to work, the little bit of love in the house left. My mom was a very disturbed person, and she would burn me with cigarettes if I needed anything. So, and then followed being hit, being slapped, being screamed at. And finally, at age 4.5, I had so much abuse that I stopped talking. I just could only whisper. So I think I probably got punished again for that and told to only smile. So when I grew up, I looked for help because I was suicidal. I was afraid of people. If they touched me, I would cringe. I would flinch away. So I looked for healing, and whoever I went to said I couldn't heal. I was too damaged. Psychologist, psychiatrist. So I just thought, well, they don't know that. They don't know the answer for me. So I kept looking, and I found a gentle preschool teacher, former preschool teacher, who was a head therapist at an institute, and he gave me 3 sessions a month, and I started asking him for childhood experiences, especially baby experiences. He said yes, and the repressed child disappeared into the background, and a new, joyful, energetic, healthy child came out and had a childhood. And as the therapy progressed, I absolutely knew what were the aspects, the keys to my healing. And so later I wrote a book about it and became a co-therapist and helped many people heal, taught doctors, taught psychologists. So I wrote the steps down, and the book is called Gentle Reparenting, the Original Guide. And therapists can just add it to their usual therapy, and in an hour a week, people who couldn't heal. And so then I wrote another little book with photos, with just artistry, called Mind to Heart Healing, about the powerful statements that are a key to this healing. So it just takes a very special healer who's a good listener, who can say only these statements, as far as statements from a parent ego state, and it creates a strong, healthy ego state and a strong foundation. So I went from a miserable, scared person to a joyful person. My nickname was Magic, and my theme became, I believe in magic, love. Yeah, so then I wrote that book, and then I started getting contact with my angels and guides.
Okay, before you move on, I just wanted to make a comment. I am just blown away at the very destructive, abusive childhood that you've had. You must have come in as a very strong soul to find the courage to stay alive and not to die through that process. And so for the fact that you made it through your whole childhood is just amazing. I just have to say how rare it is for me to meet someone that survived a childhood like that, and then also had the courage to go through intense therapy to find the right therapist and to begin to find the light and to be joyful. Because I remember the first time I met you, it was at a dance, and you just seemed like this beautiful ball of light and love shining through. And it's very rare that I meet a wise woman, elder, that is just so filled with love and light, that is extremely radiant. You really have a radiance about you that is exceptional. So I know that you've been doing your work, and I just feel so honored and blessed. Truly, namaste to you, dear one. I feel such an honor to know that you survived this, but also to take it to a whole level of writing a book. And then I was reading on Amazon how this was a very innovative technique that you created. It's unlike anything out there. So I would love to continue to hear how that transformed your connection from psychotherapy to now the spiritual. You had mentioned a relationship with the angels.
Because in my childhood I was so abused, I thought that feeling good was when no one was hurting me. And so when I had these experiences at being held in arms of a gentle therapist, I started to feel good for the first time. And when that good feeling came, I felt God. So God came. And so that never left. And I began to get very close to God, talking all day as my best friend.
Wonderful. So there was a divine connection that you were beginning to have.
Yeah, there was.
Now, you had mentioned something about steps to mastery. Is there a story that you could share about that? Or
Oh, I used to, I went on a trip to my mom's, and I still had a relationship with both my parents in spite of all that happened. And she had a book by my bedside called Don't Push the River. And I read it, and it led me on a library search for metaphysical books. And I read all 15 that were in the whole library.
Wow.
That's all they had. It's this little shelf with a few books, and they fascinated me. So I soon found a metaphysical library nearby with hundreds of books. And I read, and so I would read these books and I would do the exercises, and whatever worked, I took notes. So I started writing a book about that. Pretty soon, I had that and poems to God began to come. So I actually found a publisher who was going to publish a book, a trilogy called How to Find Love from People, Angels, and God. And so, but then that company went out of business, and I put it on the internet. But that's what happened. So those books were there. The first one is a metaphysical guide, learning as I learned, and then mastery as you gain knowledge and practice.
So did that inspire you to write the book Simple Steps to Mastery?
Oh, yeah. And at the same time, I was having these beautiful poems to God, and they really were like prayers. But I never put amen because my prayers never ended. So it's one after the other. It all kind of came at the same time.
You didn't really mention much about Simple Steps to Mastery, but you've written at least 10 books. So I'm assuming you're talking about Love Songs to God, Volume 1. So you had mentioned that one thing that really inspired you was being in the garden, smelling roses.
Oh, here's what happened. In that same place where I was in the garden doing the violet flame decrees, one day I was in the bathroom looking in the mirror, and I said to God, "Dear God, I read about compassion, but don't forget, I had just learned to feel all the emotions in my therapy." And so I said, "What does compassion feel like, God?" And I felt this beautiful energy filled my heart, and I smelled roses. So I was going to church on Sunday with a friend that would drive me, and he would drive along this road that was very barren, and there were no roses around. And I told him the rose story, and he said, "I smell them." And he started looking all around for the roses. There weren't any. And so then we got to church, and it was in an oak grove. It was the Essene Church in the San Diego area. And I told the story there, and then we smelled the roses there. So that happened for a long time. Blessings, miracles.
I love that. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
So you had a divine question about compassion when you smelt the roses.
Yeah, and had that beautiful experience. And then when I sold it and somebody cleaned it for me, she said, "Oh, Jeannie, this bathroom smells like roses."
I love it.
And then a lot of time passed, years passed, and I was still on the spiritual path. One thing after another, I learned so many things. I was reading a mystical book about renunciation and becoming celibate. Well, I suddenly stood up in the middle of the living room and said, "I renounce, I renounce, I renounce." I don't know, that just came from inside. And I walked out a little later, and there were these beautiful climbing roses. They were very dark red, deeper than wine color. And they went all the way from the ground, about a yard wide, all the way to the roof. And I'd always stand in front of them and look at them. So I did. And all the many petals let loose and just showered me with rose petals. And there was no breeze. It was definitely a blessing about my path, about the renunciation.
So what was it like to be showered with rose petals? Like, can you walk us through that feeling?
It was just, well, you know how beautiful it is when you see a gorgeous flower. It was like that, but being rained on with these petals, it was magic. It's just, you know, I was so close to God and have been, and it was just like this connection was God's way of showing me that God is right with me.
It's like you said, being rained on with rose petals, and a sense of beauty and a sense that God is with you. And that must have been so empowering from the beginning of your life to this point in the journey of where you were heading.
Well, at this point, that other childhood was gone. I had this loving childhood with a few loving therapists and in my wonderful new childhood. And that's what I lived from. That other is like, if I talk about those things, I'll feel a sadness. And I did a lot of emotional work, a lot of healing of that. Of course, I couldn't heal everything. That was, 18 years of it. And I didn't want to heal the rest of my life. I could have, but I had enough and I just wanted to live, enjoy. And that's what I do. I live, unless I'm mad or scared, and that happens, or upset. But other than that, I'm happy with simple things. Just as simple things like a good meal or a garden. I love gardening.
So there's one more story I'd love for you to share. You had said that some time had passed and you experienced about a 2.5 week deep experience with oneness with the Creator. So if you could just walk us through that moment of this life from that state and how it all began for you.
Oh, well, here's what happened. I had been going to enlightened people with a friend. Every Saturday, there'd be a new one in the Bay Area. And we'd go. And I said, I'm just going to be on the popcorn path. I'm going to just keep going till I pop. And I would read books about it. You don't understand anything when you read these books because it's not from the mind. So I would walk on the sidewalk and say, I'm not the body. And then I would feel this feeling of bliss. Well, so I was in front of one of these people. And he was so good, I could actually understand him because instead of talking about the things beyond the mind that you can't understand, he started pointing to the energies in our body while people would be talking to him about problems. So I wanted to hear him so much, and my mind kept going on with the grocery list. So I just said to my mind, not now. And I would pay attention to Isaac. And then my mind would talk. I say, not now. Well, I kept doing that. And I got home after the event and I was full of light. But I thought, Isaac's got so much light. I'm feeling it half an hour away because that's how far I lived from where it was. And then the light didn't leave. And I started realizing it was within me. And part of that realization was my mind wasn't here anymore. It was off to the side like a radio. Maybe 2 yards over, 2 meters over to the right side. So the mind was talking, but I didn't care because I was feeling all this joy. I had so much fun. And one morning I took out this set that I'd gotten of acrylic paints. No, I think it was watercolor paints. And I'd never used them. I never painted. And I sat at the kitchen table and I painted a huge eye and it came out perfect. Even the pupil in the eye. So I wasn't doing it. This greater self had taken over. And then I started writing again. And I would go in front of these other enlightened masters like Adyashanti. Mm-hmm. And he'd have a room with like 300 people. And he'd invite people to come up and I'd raise my hand no matter where I was, sitting in the front or standing in the back. He'd always pick me, always, always. And I'd go up and I'd say, oh, I have another poem. Can I read it to you? And I would read it, and I would watch the people in front of me, and it would go through them like a wave. It was so amazing. I finally, after 2 years later, when I wrote the next book, my next discovery, he called the games that I created in this book.
The story that you had mentioned to me earlier about awakening to the oneness with the Creator, you said that you wrote a book called Awakening to Our Oneness.
Yes, that's correct. So these were some of the things I would read to this group. And I call it our oneness because it isn't unique to me. It's all of our natural state. And we're connected, we're one, without the ego, which is only a thought at a time. So here was this mind chattering. And once in a while, it would say something kind of ugly. And I think, oh, well, what's that? With all this beauty around, what's that one thought? So I would say to people, don't worry about your ego. It's only one thought at a time.
Perfect. So that is a wonderful story. I love how you connected to the divine and this oneness, this totality. It must have been incredibly blissful. And to also have the ability to shut off the chatterbox and just really be in sacred space, especially when you met someone like this Isaac fellow that sounds like a real profound mentor in your life. That must have been a huge breakthrough for you, I would imagine.
Well, it was, but it wasn't something I did. This was just something the divine did, because when it happens to each one of us, it could be different. There's probably as many experiences like mine with that sound over on the side as there are stars in the sky.
Exactly. So it sounds like it was a divine timing, like you had gone through enough life initiations to get to that point of receiving this blessing, this miracle.
I call it a blessing and a miracle all at once.
Okay, so we're going to go to a commercial break. We'll be back in a few minutes, so thank you. Hi, I'm Saharaexodus, and I am an ordained shamanic priestess, and I've had the blessing of having spiritual experiences throughout my life. This background has given me many insights and the opportunity to share what I've learned. I now offer a spiritual experience process that unravels those complex messages that may seem hard to interpret, that challenges us emotionally or energetically. Have you had a spiritual experience, such as a sign, blessing, or miracle, that has left you wondering what it means? Sometimes there are several parts, like pieces, that need to be put together into a puzzle picture, which is meant to make sense, because it's wisdom from your Creator. Here are some examples of these timeless, otherworldly moments. Prayers, visions, visitations, serendipity, divine timing, vivid dreams, coincidences, synchronicity, ecstatic tantra, spiritual signs, waking dreams, being in the flow, existential insights, flashbacks, deja vu, earth angel support, kundalini activation, meditations, breath work, heightened states in nature, near-death experiences, sacred plant medicine, fasting, creative expression such as writing and art, intense emotions inspired from concerts, music, and dancing. Why process with me? We could put the pieces together, understand the details, have support to face your fears, receive help to integrate. Do you feel like something is unusual? Perhaps there is an SOS from the other side trying to reach you. Your life matters, so getting support for your spiritual experiences may help you accept your heroine's journey better or gain valuable insights. Come and explore your meaningful, intuitive messages so I could help you unlock and decode those important messages from your soul. So welcome back, and I have a lovely guest, Jeannie Alvin, who's a psychotherapist, a light worker, a miracle prayer, and innovative divine being. So welcome back, Jeannie. So as we're sharing these amazing books that you've written and incredible stories about miracles, blessings, and signs, when I met you, you had mentioned a ton of books, and this one book really popped out at me. It's called Awaken to Life, Better Than You Ever Have Dreamed. And it's really an amazing story about, well, you had mentioned Eckhart Tolle, who is great at kind of discussing the philosophy of being in the now moment. But what I love about this book is you share real experiences and you call them games, which I love the playfulness about you, where these games get you into a space of really experiencing oneness from a practical point of view. So I'd love to hear some stories that you experienced that kind of brought you into this place.
Sure. Okay, so time passes. It's 2 years later, and Isaac's back in town, who's a friend, by the way, of Adyashanti. And I'm sleeping on my friend's sofa because I didn't have a lot of money at the time. And so I was driving on the freeway, which you kind of are on automatic pilot because you drive so long to get anywhere. So I was talking to God about my financial ups and downs, growing up in poverty in a good neighborhood. So we were the poor people, and everybody around us had new clothes, and we had Goodwill clothes. I was talking to God about it, and I noticed the energies in my chest and calling them sensations. Anything in the shell of the body that you notice, you could call it a sensation or emotion or pain, but it all boils down to sensations. So I had this talk for 10 or 15 minutes with God about the finances, and then started noticing, and they disappeared. Well, I got to my friend's house where I was staying on the sofa, and he said, "Oh, Jeannie, just a minute." And he ran upstairs, ran downstairs with a wad of $20 bills in his hand and gave them to me and thanked me for helping him record Isaac in the seminar. So I was really touched, and so after tears and thanking him, I said, I was just having this conversation with God about finances and noticed the energies, and they disappeared after I noticed them, and then you give me this. I don't think it's an accident. Well, he didn't think so either. Well, then that started a whole year of me doing this. Anything that would come up, I would create a process. Just the process is just like when I awakened, where I said no thank you to the mind, not now. But instead of saying not now, I changed it to blah, 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 because that's what the mind does all day long, blah, blah, blah. So I would just take a sticky note, go for a walk, and then the sticky note just said blah, 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 and I would notice inside my body. Well, one time I even went to Adyashanti's, and he was having a long conversation with a guy, noticing this and that, and talking about knots. And when it got to the time to participate, I raised my hand and went up, and I said, I've developed these processes I call games. And instead of all that you went through, I'm telling Adya, with this guy, all you have to do is create this process with the creator, and the creator will let you feel sensations in your body. And then you notice them and it's gone. And Adyashanti said, he says, I'm not worried about you. He said, these games you created are secret agents of God. So that's what they are. And then I wrote a shorter book, just bringing, instead of the stories that are in that book, which is the truth, they're all true stories about people who had experiences with this and different games. They're really fun. Like you were mentioning, you like the one about space between words.
Yes,
like,
what I wanted to say about that is when you mix the first game, which is about blah, 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 just trying to get the thoughts out of your mind and being present with the sensations, and then you bring it to the next game, which is you're still able to talk or think, but you focus on having space between the words. there begins to be kind of this spiritual energy of oneness or connectedness that I've found. So when you're building on each game, it starts to really shift one's level of consciousness, wouldn't you say?
Yes, absolutely. You're going into oneness. That is oneness. That space between the words, that is the oneness. Yeah, that's it. I realized at the end of that year and writing the book about it, everything in life registers in our body as sensations. Emotion are lots of sensations concentrated, and we recognize them because of where they are. But even thoughts and judgments register. That was an interesting realization.
So there's one final story, and it's really about many things that happened to you going to India. This is something you shared with me before. And there's a connection with Amma, and there's a whole level of beautiful messages. So I would love to hear more about that. Would you like to share that with our audience?
Sure. These same friends where I stayed when Isaac was in town invited me to go to a oneness blessing event called deeksha. So I went, and I loved the energy. It was an energy of oneness. And they had just begun a process called the 21-day process. And John went with 3 other people from our country, or 4, at the very first one in the whole world. And I went to the next one. And but I didn't have the money to go. I was not in abundance. And so I prayed for the money to go, because it was a lot of money. It was going to cost about $7,000, way, way, way beyond what I had. I got, as an answer to that prayer, I got credit cards in the mail with 0% interest in a $5,000 credit limit. So I called him and asked him to raise it to $7,000, which they did. So that covered my airfare and the cost of the course. So I wanted to go early, because I had been to India once before on a spiritual journey, and I wanted to find the spiritual center called an ashram, which is different from where they had the course. And that this was just beginning in the whole world. There wasn't even an office. It was just at this lady's house, and they didn't know of an ashram. So the night before my plane left, 2.5 weeks before the course, I got a phone call from the lady, the oneness blessing lady, saying a taxi driver named Ram will meet you at the airport with your name on a sign, and he will take you to a motel near Amma's ashram. So there I was. That was a miracle. That was literally a sign and a blessing all in one. So I go, and it's really wonderful. It turns out that she was coming out to the public twice a day. So I got to experience that. Pretty soon I was staying in the ashram. Then I found out that you could have a private interview for her for $500. Well, I didn't have it because I spent it all on the trip and the course. But I went to the ATM machine anyhow, just to look at my balance. There was $500.
Wow, you're an incredible manifester. I love it, because you wanted it so badly. God gave it to you.
Yes. So I got to go in, and you would go in one by one in front of her, and her interpreter would be right by her. And I asked her to give me the blessing that miracles would come through my prayers and deekshas and blessings as they did through her. And she put her hands on my head and said, "Yes, I give." And then the guide took me to sit down near her and went back to her, and then came right back to me and said, "Amma blesses everything you do." Well, I thought that meant my spiritual things I did, which is a lot of my life, but not my whole life. But reading with somebody who could hear spirit, Amma came in and said, she doesn't just bless my spiritual work, she blesses everything, which is a good thing, because my life has been one of challenges, like my childhood, continuing on life, life on this planet. And so I've needed blessings, like everybody, right? Who's had an easy ride here on this planet?
It sounds like this was such a huge gift from the divine, because of what you said, your childhood, and So it's sort of like a 360-degree moment in that time and space.
Yeah, it was joy. And even in the course, I would have to run to the bathroom, and I would kind of get lost there because I would just be in this state of oneness, and I would not feel my body. I was just feeling this divine energy. And so the guy, they would worry. They had attendants in the bathroom. They'd keep coming by and saying, "Are you okay?" Then I'd go back, and they'd be having a process with a circle, and I'd be left out, which was kind of reminiscent of my childhood because I'd be left out. Well, the guides would put me in, and then they'd have me be first to do the whatever little process we were doing. So again, it was that same dichotomy showing up.
So what I'm curious about is when you experience this amazing ability to offer blessings to others, do you recall a story that happened shortly thereafter to kind of prove that this $500 investment works and that it's definitely, meaningful for you and for maybe somebody else that you may have blessed? Do you remember anything like that?
Oh, I sure do.
Okay.
There was a lady who was losing the feelings in her fingers, and she was also worried about her cats because they were getting out and the coyotes might get them. So I did a prayer on the phone with her, some deekshas on the phone or prayers. They both work, miracles. And she got better. And so her cousin had been a smoker for many, many years. And her cousin was supposed to go in the hospital and get stents in her heart. Doctors had already done tests and knew that she needed them with cameras down her arteries to her heart were blocked. So I did 6 deekshas at night on the phone with her. And I said, I'm afraid to give you more energy. This is a lot of energy. Normally you don't give that much, even 6.
Mm-hmm.
That's like double, triple. So I said, call me back after you get home and we can do more. So she called me back and she said, I don't need stents. She said the doctors put the camera down me again as a precaution before the operation, and there was no blockage. They could not believe it. So that happened. And then what happened is there was this woman who was coordinating deeksha events, and she heard about the miracles and she loved deeksha. Well, so she came over for a weekend with me, and I had already been doing a one-day course on manifesting that was amazing before going and getting deekshas. And we talked about my childhood experiences. And I thought, instead of people going to a therapist to heal, what if they went to God as a female therapist and God as the male therapist, whoever they would pick, God or whatever they call that, creator. And so we planned it and did it. And I gave these 2-day workshops with God as the divine parent for people and for them. So we did the games at the beginning of the workshop. We did the processes, and we did them very deeply so they really could become aware of their sensations, like you and reading the book and going through those. And we had them pick a father God and a mother God. And then I printed out these wonderful statements that are in that book. So I thought, gosh, this is wonderful. I'm going to go back to where I live and ask the volunteers for my favorite deeksha events to trade places with me and do partners and do this. So we would do that. I had volunteers come and we would read the statements to each other. And then I would do deekshas, blessings. So they did that for me. And then I gave myself deekshas. Oh my gosh. With the deekshas, those words get in so deeply. I could feel it.
Mm-hmm.
It was wonderful.
So to wrap things up, I just wanted to ask you, you received this incredible ability to offer blessings to others. What was one that would stand out for you that was, you really felt this energy had shifted your life? What was a story that comes to mind, just a short story of something on a personal level, because you had mentioned with the groups and with this lady, what was something that really touched you?
I just loved helping the other people at this point. I wasn't so, I'd had a lot of wonderful experiences, and I, still was so close to God, but I just cared about giving this to others. That's all I cared about. That happened in my spiritual path, because at first, like all of us, we get on the path to grow, which is a very good thing. But at some point, it shifted to me not caring about my growth, but caring about helping others grow.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. Now, you had said to me earlier that this experience in India inspired you to write a book about Alma. What's the name of that title?
Well, it's actually kind of a history of the whole story, and including what it was like during the 21-day process. And it's a history book now, because we went from a 21-day process to become a deeksha giver to a 9-day to a 3-day, and now in an hour online. I mean, it's totally changed. But in that time, I had done devotional singing in California and knew a lot of the meanings of words and chants, but most people didn't. And so they would do these chants and songs during the 21 days, and people were kind of bored because it was just music to them. And so I translated that. I wrote down the meanings, and I also put it in Spanish because I spoke Spanish, and posted it on the bulletin boards for the other participants. And they loved it. So this was during the process. They loved it because then they could join in. They could understand more of what was happening. So when I got back home, I thought, I've got to write this down. Other people are going to go, and they're going to want to know what these words mean and participate more. I started writing it, and I just kept writing for 3 days, and I wrote the whole book. And then I took it back the next time I went to India, and they said, oh, this must have taken you a long time to write. And I said, no, it just 3 days. It wrote itself. And Bhagavan blessed it, and many people read it. And they then went to visit Amma and had interviews with her and got miracle blessings. People all over the world got to do that. So that was very great. And I don't know, it's been so long. That was 2005 and 6. So things have changed.
Right.
I think they even let Westerners in that ashram anymore. So I was very fortunate to go.
Thank you, Jeannie. Thank you so much for that review. I really appreciate it. So in a sense, writing the book in 3 days was another miracle. So in itself, as you said, the desire to help others really became the new miracle, and how the divine was pouring through you incredible information. So Jeannie, I know that you're this incredible light worker with many spiritual gifts. And one of them, as we've been talking about quite deeply, is this miracle of healing that happens when you pray for people, when you connect with the divine will. So perhaps if you would like to share with us a prayer for our audience, so together we could join in to get some guidance and to pray for the light to prevail this darkness in our world right now, and to also energize the light workers to carry on with the strength to offer their loving support for humanity. Would you please do the honors and share that with us, love?
Oh, sure, I'd be very glad to. It's so easy because I just say the prayer and it happens. So, and the more people that hear the prayer, the stronger it comes. So if people want to gather, say that somebody hears it, and then they say, oh, look, this lady, and Sahara's videos recorded, they could then gather their family and play it again with more people and have it even come even more strongly. Everybody just notice your heart and either intend or pray as you usually do. I like to do both sometimes. Just my sacred intention is to bring light to the darkness and light to the world, light to each person and light to the world. Notice our hearts and connect with the divine intelligence, divine presence, the name, however we pray, however each one prays, do that now. So dear God, dear divine presence, I, Mother, Father, God, intention, oneness, blessings is prayers for each one listening, for Saharaexodus here, for our beautiful tech person, George, for each person listening to this. Whatever you're praying for, as long as it's positive for you and the world. I pray for miracles of blessings for that, for you and all people like you in the world, that it gets magnified. Everything in my clearing process and healing routine and more and better. I ask for miracles of healing and grace. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Mm. I just want to bathe in that energy right now. It's so beautiful, just feeling the silence and the connectedness. It was absolutely lovely. You're truly a gift, Jeannie Alvin. Thank you so much for your time today, sharing your expertise, your love, your heart, and for the courageous soul that you are, that you decided to be born at this wild time on the cusp of two ages, where one age is dying and the new one is being reborn. It takes so much courage. But I think because you've come from one extreme end to the other, you're a wonderful living example of a walking miracle. Thank you so much, dear, for being my special guest today on our show.
Thank you, thank you.
So I just wanted to acknowledge that if you would like to connect with Jeannie Alvin, she is available at Linktree Jeannie 12345, and that's with 2 N's, Jeannie 12345. And all of her links are on Linktree that you could check out. She's got incredible books, videos, articles. She's on Amazon, and so many things to explore and to connect with. There's a possibility of emailing her as well. If you have any questions, or perhaps you'd like to interview her down the road or have her as a guest on your show. So this show is my first one, Signs, Blessings, and Miracles, Sacred Guided Messages. And I believe that Jeannie Alvin is a wonderful example of transforming from a very challenging childhood to basically being a beautiful earth angel, sharing her lovely stories on miracles, signs, and blessings. And earlier I shared some of my own. And as you could see, the way we looked at our lives, it's really about looking at the symbolism that happens for you. If something shows up, like that song that I sang earlier, there was this extra energy about it. It was sort of like, wow. And it just really was vibrating in a deeper way, like pay attention to that song on the radio, pay attention to that piece of paper that dropped on the floor, pay attention to these rose petals that are all of a sudden flying all over your head. So, and also you might notice the thought that you're having in your mind, like if I have a question in my mind and the wind that's blowing into my hair, the wind is saying, yes, go for it. Or a piece of paper thrown on the ground that's got a big no on it, that this is a sign. And sometimes the divine speaks to us in these codes and mysteries, and it's not necessarily a big loudspeaker blaring at us, but so we just need to kind of slow down and connect to the subtleties. And then also, when you think, oh, it was just a coincidence, take some time and reflect, sit on your porch and have a nice cup of tea and review with your journal these kind of feelings that happen in your day and the week. And you'll notice that you're not walking alone. You are with your creator that's with you every step of the way. So you too have signs, blessings, and miracles that could support your journey. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. I'm really honored and grateful. And we hope to see you next week. Namaste. Blessings.
Thank you for joining us. Be sure to tune in next week for some more medicine to uplift your heart with another pathway to fulfillment. In the meantime, you can learn more about Sahara Exodus at priestesssahara.com. May your soul know you are perfect right now as your heart expands into light, love, and acceptance of this moment.